Hey, what's up, guys? Rico here, CEO of SourceFind Asia, co-host of the Made in China podcast, host of the SourceFind Asia YouTube channel or vlog, whatever you want to call it. And I'm live in Nantong, hanging out in a warehouse, just overlooking some of our CrossFit equipment that we're shipping out before Chinese New Year. And in today's video, I wanted to touch on travel when you're visiting factories, because I'm in Nantong. I've been in Nantong since Sunday. Today's Thursday. Tomorrow I'm heading out to Ningbo in Zhejiang province, and then I'm back in Guangzhou. So I wanted to give you the basics of traveling when you're visiting factories.
Stop looking at you. How many boyfriends do you have? 5 or 6. I'm alone now. I'm a super rapper, it's so good today, but want to take me by the hand. I got all the city, I got locked in the big city. I got 50 dollars, still riding it. Says my face, I'm so freaking my situation is stabilizing. It's so good, I tell you the story right now. The devil want to take me by the hand. I go to hell, I feel the need to escape. You feel so loud, got everybody in that big city. My brothers in 10 years, it was in
All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes. So travel when you're visiting a factory. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. China's huge, right? But there's a lot of different ways to travel. That's one of the most innovative things I think about China, is like the way they figured out how to get people from one place to another place, because there's so many people. The place is gigantic, and also to make it affordable for the vast majority of Chinese people and international people. So I think the basic things is when you're based in, for somebody like me, I'm based in southern China, so most of the time I'm dealing with manufacturers that are in southern China. If you watch my previous videos, I've told you that most of the factories that you will be looking for are in southern China. But on occasion, that's changing because southern China is becoming more expensive. But there are also more specialized factories in northern China. So for example, CrossFit equipment is not a product that is commonly made in southern China. Most of the metalworks, most of the exercise equipment as a whole is in northern China, and specifically in like a cluster like Nantong in Jiangsu province. So like you learn about that stuff as you go. But yeah, so let's start off with southern China. So for me, I'm typically visiting factories from my office in Guangzhou to Dongguan, Shenzhen, and Foshan. We used to take Didi rideshare. It was Didi Shongfeng. But because there were a couple incidents where women that were taking Didis in some of the smaller towns in China at night got kidnapped and consequently murdered. So Didi just decided to drop the service. The first time it happened, they suspended the service for a week, and then the second time it happened, I think they just decided to drop that service. So that rideshare service, which was pretty awesome, would pretty much go, take a 2-hour car or 3-hour car between cities for like $20 to maybe 40 if you wanted the car all to yourself. So it was a pretty affordable way to travel for business, and I used to use that a lot. Now, because that doesn't exist, we will rent a car. So there's a sort of temporary rental car app. I forget the name, but I'll have a screenshot of it up here as I'm talking. And basically you obviously you have to have a driver's license and all that stuff, but you basically have your credit card or your bank card. You rent a car for the day. There's a base rate for the cars, not super expensive. Obviously there's more expensive cars, bigger cars, smaller cars. But I would say the average base rate for the car for one day is like 80 RMB, which is like slightly over $12 or something like that, $15. Could go all the way up to like 30, 40 to $60. But I would say, you're probably looking at around 20 on the safe side. And then you have to pay for gas. So whatever the rate for gas would be. I know that on average, when we take those kind of cars, we're spending 150 to 250 RMB on a round trip. So it's pretty affordable, still affordable, but the disadvantage here is that now you have to have somebody who can drive. And when we're taking the DDs, you could sit back and you can work as you're traveling to the factory. But when we have to use this rideshare thing or this car, and I mean, when we're taking the rideshare thing, you could do that. But if you have to rent a car and drive it, that means that you need to get somebody, you need to either pay somebody to be a driver, or I have to have one of my employees drive the car as we're going. Those are a couple different ways to go. I think that's more so for people like me who are traveling very frequently, and for me time is of the essence. I can't really it's different if you're flying into China and you're going for factory visits, then you might want to take your time and you might be able to use alternative transport methods. But for me, I like to go, come back. I like to be in control of my schedule when it comes to that kind of travel. So the other methods that I think it's more common and that people already know about are buses, trains, and planes, right? So within southern China, you're probably not going to be taking a plane, but you will most likely be taking a train or a bus. So in Guangzhou, from Guangzhou to Shenzhen, there's a normal speed train. It takes about an hour and a half, hour 45 to go from, an hour 20 to an hour 45 to go from Guangzhou to Shenzhen. So not too bad of a train, but there's now a high-speed train, which is about 45 minutes to an hour. That goes from, there's always been a high-speed train. That's 30 minutes from Guangzhou to Shenzhen. But there's another high-speed train that goes 45 minutes to an hour to Hong Kong from Guangzhou. The typical train from Hong Kong to Guangzhou is 2 hours. So, there's a couple different methods there. And then of course the cost is not too expensive. Guangzhou to Shenzhen is like maybe 90 RMB. And then Guangzhou to Hong Kong is about 150 or 180. So really not too bad one way. The high-speed train is slightly more expensive just because it's a high-speed train and it's going to save some time. But you also have to take into consideration from which part of the city are you going from and which part of the city are you going to end up in. So when you're doing your research as you're picking out which factory you're going to visit, do you want to take the high-speed train from Guangzhou to Shenzhen? It might not make sense, because if you take the high-speed train from Guangzhou and that's going from Guangzhou South Railway Station, and then you're going into Shenzhen, Futian might be extremely far away from your factory, so then you end up spending another hour plus maybe taking the subway or with your factory driving you from the train station to the factory. So you have to factor in those decisions if you decide to take a train. The bus, I haven't really taken the bus that much, but the bus is significantly cheaper. I think it's more frequent. Sometimes the buses are running 24 hours. So, I find that if you really were desperate to go in between cities in the middle of the night, let's say 2 o'clock in the morning, you could take a 2 o'clock in the morning bus from Guangzhou to Dongguan or Guangzhou to Shenzhen. Those are the main methods of travel. Now, in terms of payments, or in terms of applications rather, you want to use Ctrip. So Ctrip is what we use. The original name is China Trip, Ctrip. Now I think they shortened it to Trip, so trip.com, and there's an app. So you can book flights, you can book trains on the application, you can also book hotels. And the reason why Ctrip is so effective for China is because you're going to find that there's a lot of hotels that are just not listed on traditional websites like booking.com or Agoda or whatever you might use. And then Airbnb in China is just not that that commonly used. You're going to get the best rates for trains, you're going to get the best rates for local airlines, you're going to get the best rates for hotels. And like I said, there's going to be some local hotels that are just not listed on other applications, or they just aren't that heavily reviewed on other applications, because there are a ton of great 4-star Chinese hotels. You would never find them in any other traditional sense. So like using an application like Ctrip, you can jump in there, you can put in the city, the date, like the way you'd use anything else, and then you're going to see options that you usually wouldn't have. So I'd recommend downloading Ctrip or Trip, and whatever you want to call it, and register yourself, and then you can use a foreign credit card, international credit card, to make payments there. If you have WeChat Pay, if you have that linked up, you can use WeChat Pay. You can also pay through Alipay. It's pretty intuitive for anybody. So if once you're actually in the city and you want to travel within the city, most of the time factories will pick you up from your hotel, take you to the factory, maybe take you to lunch, take you to dinner, and then take you back to the factory or to the hotel. But if you are, let's say you don't want, one factory to know that you're going to another one, or one factory for whatever reason is not available to pick you up, or you need to go from, the airport to your hotel and it's late at night and there's no one around, you can obviously take a taxi. But the communication, the language barrier is going to be an issue. So if you want to take a taxi, what you need to do is you need to take a screenshot or print out or get a business card with the Chinese address of wherever it is that you're going. So if you're going to a hotel, if you're going to a restaurant, whatever, just find the Chinese address and take a screenshot of that. If you're using Ctrip, it has an option that says taxi printout, and you can show the taxi. It shows the taxi the right information that they need to take you to where you're going. Another option is there's a website that I'm forgetting that is very, very famous, and they tend to, for whatever reason, maybe they just have had a lot of people traveling to China, but they tend to have Chinese addresses on them. So I would go on Yahoo, because maybe you don't have a VPN. So go on yahoo.com, search whatever location it is that you're going to, and then you should be able to find a website that has the taxi address. I'm sure by the time this video comes out, I'll have a screenshot of a website that I'm referring to. That's one, but I think the big one would be download Didi. Didi is Chinese Uber, and it's very, very intuitive because it will translate. If you type in, let's say, Nantong International Airport or Nantong Airport, it'll pick it up in English and it'll show you the location. Obviously, it's going to use your GPS to pick out where you are, so the pickup location will pick up where you are, and then the destination that you're heading to will be Nantong International Airport. But on the flip side, the driver that's picking you up, everything is translated into Chinese already for them. So it's not going to say Nantong International Airport in English for them, it's going to say everything in Chinese. And then there's a chat box there where you can type in a message, or there's preset messages like, hey, my location is accurate, hey, I need a few minutes, hey, I can't talk on the phone right now, can you text me? And you type it in English and then it translates into Chinese, and it actually shows you on the chat screen the translation as it's happening. That's awesome, because as long as you know the address, if you can type in the address, it'll probably pull up the address for you anyways as you're typing it. And then at the same time, you avoid the issues with language barrier where you have to now explain something to the driver, or the driver might call you and try to figure out where you are. Instead of doing that, you can just text him back and forth through the Didi application. And again, crucial thing, because a lot of these applications that are local for Chinese people, you're not able to use as foreigner. But with Didi, they have, like I said, the English version, and then you can pay with an international credit card and all the local, WeChat Pay or Alipay, as I mentioned before. And same thing with planes. If you're taking a plane and you want to be using Ctrip to book your flight, a little quick tip: when you go to the train stations and you're picking up a ticket, you have to, again, through Ctrip, there's like a little, if you pay for it on Ctrip, there's like a little code that pops up, and then you can go to the front of the line when you go there, and then you show them the ticket number, and then you give them your passport, and then they'll type it in and they'll check your passport and check if you're the right person. They'll give you the ticket. If you do decide to take a bus, something to keep in mind is that you can't, as a foreigner, you can't actually buy a bus ticket online. You have to physically go to the bus station. That's pretty much it. Like, in terms of traveling when you're visiting factories, those are the basics. And I will see you guys next week.
Talking about the girl, I just talking bullshit, I'm a secret, I'm a bitch shit. We sit talking about the girl, I just talking bullshit, I'm a secret, I'm a bitch shit. We sit talking about the girl, I just talking bullshit, I'm a secret, I'm a bitch shit.